Hi guys, Paul Seils with a special guest today, Stephen Lymbery. We're going to be talking about privacy and do we still have a right to privacy, or that's probably a bit of an obvious question at this point in time, but I'm just going to create Stephen's bio for anyone that's listening in at this point in time as well. So Stephen's got a background, studied very diverse background, including medicine, law, history, psychology, and anything else that garners his attention. He currently hosts a common law group based out of Australia under the banner of Common Law Courts of Terra, Australis. He endeavours to bring forth the fiction, bring forth the facts, and about exposing the illusion of the fiction world, providing people with solutions to the actions of criminals occupying unlawfully the positions of control in the government, corporation, and the web that spreads from that deceit. Stephen considers himself to be most fortunate that he was able to spend considerable amount of time with David-Wynn Miller, or for those that know David, or knew David, and still know David, David-Wynn, Miller, initially as a participant in a seminar in New Zealand, ultimately completing court and other documentation, attending court and co-hosting seminars with David. As a result of his time with David and the knowledge and logic that he experienced with David, he's with the position of the plenipotentiary judge and postmaster with the confirmation through contract with David-Wynn Miller and Monty Edwin Mueller. To his knowledge, Stephen's the only plenipotentiary judge in Australia with this confirmation in writing by David-Wynn Miller. Hi, Stephen. Thanks for joining us.
G'day, Paul.
There's a lot of ground that we've got to cover, even just in as much as that introduction is concerned. So just for the uninitiated, and I've had the good fortune to have known Stephen for a long period of time, probably maybe 15 years or something now. So for the uninitiated, what is a plenipotentiary judge?
A plenipotentiary judge is a judge that can go across jurisdictions. And you're not there necessarily, so I could go into other courtrooms and that sort of thing and observe what's going on. And the object of doing that is to bring to the attention of the participants in that particular courtroom or case, anomalies there may be or things that are out of order. And just basically, it's not received very well at all. So if you're not a member of the Law Society or the Bar Association and whatever you like, they don't really appreciate, want of a better description, private people interfering in their their processes.
That's very interesting. So when you say, I'm going to cover a lot of ground, and some people might have some knowledge in this area or not, but just for the uninitiated. So when you say private people or persons, what do you mean by that?
Well, somebody who's not contracted to the court. So if I'm not a member of the Law Society, I'm an outsider. I'm not an officer of the court. Now, you're familiar with the term an officer and a gentleman?
Yes.
Okay, so
Richard Gere.
Sorry, Richard here?
No, Richard Gere.
Oh, Richard Gere, yeah, sorry. Yeah, so...
not the movie, I take it, though.
No, not the movie. So there's some attributes you could apply to a gentleman if a gentleman was a gentleman, as they're supposed to be. And one of those main features would be the gentlemen don't lie. So if you're an officer of the court, you're also a gentleman, therefore you're not a liar. The flip side is, as far as they're concerned, if you're not an officer of the court, you're not a gentleman, therefore you're a liar. And you don't actually have any standing. The judge can only hear an officer of the court. So there's a big dog and pony show sort of going on, and there's a whole lot of different ways to be in the courtroom as such. And I'm mixed with a lot of different people who have success doing many different things, but it boils down to the individual usually and the extent of their knowledge.
Yeah.
And what they can do.
Yeah. Before we start digging into in relation to matters in relation to privacy, etc., I just wanted to talk a little bit about the background as well. And we've had a lot of journey, a big journey and a lot of background there. And I also had the good fortune to spend some time with David-Wynn Miller as well. Probably not as much time as you did, but I was fortunate enough to take David to a radio station and
with Tiger Bales from memory.
Tiger Bales, that's it.
Yes.
God bless Tiger Bales and his family. And we covered a lot of ground, and Tiger was kind enough to give David probably nearly an hour of conversation on Let's Talk. And he covered a lot of ground, including the deliberate modification of language, well, specifically the deliberate modification of the English language. And there is a contradiction in the different terms between, like, the Black's Law definition of words and perhaps what we've been, to a certain degree, indoctrinated and told what the definition of those words were, perhaps through the educational system or through the traditional Oxford Dictionary terms of definition. For example, and David with Tiger in that conversation had the conversation about the context of the word Aboriginal.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to expand upon, carrying on with in relation to that conversation? Just expand
well, people they might as well know now. They may not realise it, but there's a lot of people refer to Aboriginals now as originals.
Yes.
And the basis for that, and the reason why they do that, Paul, is largely due to you. So you're a very humble man, but you took David to that radio show.
Yeah.
You arranged that. You got that all happening, and that was there that David was able to talk to a wide community and explain that with the language. AB is from the Latin, like you have, like say, with the term people may have heard in legal circles of ab initio, which is from the beginning. So AB means from, or not, or away. So the significance with Aboriginal is not original. And people can say, oh, that's ridiculous. It's sort of this or that. But I'd bring it back to another point. If we're saying that they're the original inhabitants of the land, why don't you just call them originals?
Yeah.
Why do you need to add anything onto it that muddies the water? So Aboriginal means not original.
Mm-hmm. And David used to say it was a no contract word.
It is because it's a negative condition of state. So to say that you're not something, it's more, if I was going to say there was nothing, well, let me say, if I were to say somebody had no morals, rather than saying they had no morals, which is a negative condition of state, I might say that they were void of morals.
Yes.
So that's more giving you it's a different way of putting things, and we try to get away from negative performance. So the big thing with David-Wynn technology was that we're looking for correct sentence structure, and the term for it, if you're paying attention, and all joined by hyphens, and I won't speak the hyphens. It sort of annoys me speaking hyphens. It's because it's for written, it's for contract. It's not to write songs, it's not to have conversations in. But the correct term is correct sentence structure, communication, passe, syntax, grammar, performance. And the performance has been added relatively recently to make sure that it's an action and it's a completion on the way through. And you'll notice with my words of action and completion that they're contract words.
Yeah.
And they are in themselves they're an action, they're an active word. So we get into conditions of making a contract that exists in now time. So one of the sayings that David used to like to bring through was no law or fact shall be tried in court. Now, if you actually break that down and you have a look, that sentence, there's one thing that it doesn't contain, and that's now. The only thing that it contains is the past and the future. And you're supposed to achieve that all in one sentence.
Yeah.
So if and with no law, we can say no law or fact shall be tried in court. So shall is in the future, tried is in the past. We can say no law, which that's a negative condition of state. But we can also say that it's no law, because the law that we live under is a condition of negativity. The law tells you, well, it's not law, but we'll refer to it that way for a moment. We can break that down, but it tells you what you won't do. Where more importantly, it should be what you will do. If I'm going to say, well, Paul, let's go out for dinner. Where would you like to go? And you said, well, Stephen, I don't want to go to Chinese. I said, well, that's good, Paul, but where would you like to go? Well, I don't want a pizza. Awesome, Paul. Is it possible you could tell me where you actually want to go? Because there's a real big list of where you don't want to go. Yeah. But the law works that way. And they intentionally put problems on a page so that people get to stand and be paid, sort out the problems that they created. It's almost like someone's got to teach them how to communicate. It's not real clear. There's always, well, we've got to really work out what that means. So I suppose that's why they call it practicing.
practicing law. So in relation to law, let's just clear that up as well at the beginning too. So there's the way the words sound, but the way the words are written. So let's just break it up between the difference between LAW and law, LORE.
Okay, well, law, and an original would explain it to you better than I. Law is more about the passing down of a way of being. So that's like everything that's traditional to your culture, that sort of thing, and that would incorporate law within it. So law is more the whole thing, So if we were going to say, well, look, we're going to hold a common law court and spell it LORE, that's even going to incorporate dance and songs and how to make scones, if that's what you do, whatever. That's law is everything about your culture, everything about your traditional presence somewhere and distinction from somewhere else. But it also has your law, LAW, within it. So the law, we like to think, and this isn't when you go into a court of law, as much as what they will tell you, but we all, if I look at you and we're going to have a conversation about something, from having spent time with you, I know that we both know what's right and wrong, and we don't have to discuss it.
Yeah.
We can observe something, and I know that you're going to think like you might have some different words, but basically you're going to be going, that's wrong. And I'll be doing that, and I'll be doing that as well. And that's common to us. Common law is much more simple, more direct, and probably in some ways less forgiving. And without being religious as such, you could refer to the Bible. And depending on which religion people might be associated with or not, there's 10 commandments, but there are more than one version of 10 commandments as well, which a lot of people don't realise. And it wouldn't hurt to look that up yourself and just find out why different religions have a different 10 commandments. They have commonality, but they have certain differences. And common law basically comes back down to that, which is do no harm, be honest in your contracts, and cause no injury.
Yeah, do no harm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fairly simple.
Now, there's been a huge resurgence since the beginning of COVID in March last year in relation to people getting involved with and learning and pursuing common law. So what is common law and what is the opposite to common law?
What's the opposite to common law? Uncommon law? Okay, so common law is a concept that people have about holding a court. And we should explain, there's a few words that need to be explained in there too, even the word court. A court is like a contract. So when we go to a courthouse, we're actually going to a courthouse, and that's the house where you hear contracts, or you're entering into different contracts, or you're solving certain contracts, that type of things, and they're all individual courts, and each court has no bearing on the court next to it in another room. So if we went into a courthouse and there was 4 different judges, 4 different rooms, there could be exactly the same misdemeanor or whatever you want being heard in all 4 courtrooms.
Yeah.
And it could have been identical. Let's say there were identical things that happened, but the result in each courtroom will be different. And that's when you know the law is not a fact.
Yeah.
Now, with common law, we're looking to get back more to a fact. We don't want all this grey area. We don't want it open to interpretation, that sort of thing. And the feeling is that it would be a more just system because it doesn't have ulterior motives.
Yeah.
And I suppose in some areas I need to be perhaps, no, I don't like being politically correct. I'll call it how it is at some point, maybe not now. But my experience in the court system is there's no justice in there. They're in there, and as far as they're concerned, it's just us.
Yeah.
And we get fed upon. That's why you don't get the same results all the time. People can say I did everything right, I followed everything I should, I lost everything.
Yeah.
And there's technical points. I know of people that have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars with solicitors and never had a document filed.
Yeah, well, the incongruency, and I know that we have a lot of international visitors and members in our group and our organisation, over 11,000 people, and not all of them are based in Australia. Most of them are international, but
Yes.
there's incongruency. I don't know if you've seen it in the media recently as well, Stephen. So there was a court case where someone got arrested and denied bail for refusing to wear a face mask. But there was a guy that like raped a woman and he was given bail.
Yeah. No, that's well. So I can tell you my opinion. Everybody would have an opinion.
Yeah, I'm sure people would to the injustice of that.
Well, it's injustice, but it's there as a tool. So wear your face mask. All right, wear your face mask. That's what we're trying to tell you now. Be afraid. Yeah. Be very afraid. If you don't conform, if you don't comply, we'll get you.
Yeah.
Well, it's not law. It's just thugs. Now, when Las Vegas was under the control of organised crime, it ran a certain way. And then the government came in and took over. And I was watching some stuff about people who own casinos and that sort of thing. And they were saying, we preferred it when organised crime was controlling everything because at least they had a moral standard that they adhered to. These people do whatever they want, whenever they want, and they're just stealing.
Yeah. So we want to cover a little bit of ground, and thank you for anyone that's tuning in and listening tonight. We're going to cover a little bit of ground, and really the purpose and the intention of Messages from the Underground is to get information out to people that's perhaps not being covered. Well, most of it's not being covered by the mainstream media, but to reach people and get information out there. And I know that there's a real depth to this information that needs to get out. And I know a lot of people, I mean, you run weekly calls with common law groups and all that sort of thing as well, Stephen. So really what we were sort of like talking about here is how this is being enacted, the issues as far as privacy and surveillance is concerned, the Biosecurity Bill of 2015, which was amended 2017, which apparently hasn't been extended past the 17th of December at this point in time, but they're still acting as if it is. There's a lot of things happening at the moment. Italy, 50,000 businesses are opening up and saying, just basically telling people to get stuffed, and we're opening our businesses up. But let's talk a little bit about what's happening with as far as the Privacy Act, and let's dig a little bit more into that.
Okay. So would this be the time to say that this isn't legal advice?
Sure, absolutely. So yes, this isn't legal advice.
Yeah, this is purely entertainment and fun. So what I love to do on the weekend when I'm looking for a top time and I want an exhilarating weekend, I think I'm going to read some acts and statutes. I'm going to get into some legislation. That's going to be just awesome. One of my most favorite things.
Yeah.
This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
We've been forced into this because of what's going on. Your privacy is definitely at risk.
Yeah.
And people don't realise that with the systems that we have in play at the moment, everything is a condition of contract. Now, you use the term loosely because if you and I were going to go into contract, Paul, we would both be aware of all the terms and conditions of what was going to go on. There'd be a meeting of the minds. We'd understand where we were and we would join in the contract from there. With these people, it's all about trickery.
Yeah.
It's all about deception. Then the Privacy Act in Australia, the Privacy Act 1988 was revised in May, June last year, 2020, to incorporate or update issues on the COVID side of things. Now, in there, what they're essentially doing is coercing people or businesses to download COVID safe and to participate with that to get people to sign on with QR codes.
Yeah.
And that's an invasion of your privacy. That's an information privacy request. And there has to be a reason why, and it normally needs to be in writing.
Yeah.
So well, somebody takes authority for asking for the information.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I've been to some venues, Stephen, and I've said that, I don't have my phone with me, or it's not working, or I'm not going to sign in with a QR code, and they've basically refused me entry to the premises. Yeah,
no, I've had that. The worst one I had was in a hardware store. Anyway, but the funny thing is the gentleman's wife was interested in what I was saying, was talking to me, and that didn't go well either. Yeah. It was all right with her, but then there was a rift between the husband and wife because he was so frightened. He was so in fear, and he couldn't realise that what I was trying to do was actually help him protect his own business.
Yeah.
So, look, I've got some legislation here that we can sort of look at and that we can go through. But the bottom line here is that people need to preserve their own privacy. They need to realise they're being tricked into contracting into something that on another level is actually illegal. But like here in Australia, and it's true for other countries, but I'm not in the other countries, I'm not dealing with their system, so I can only speak for here. But you can bet your bottom dollar it's a version of what I'm saying. We do not have a government in this country. That's just straight out. We have the paperwork for it. But
okay. So let's dig into that really quickly as well. So we say we do not have a government. I mean, we certainly have a perception or we have an illusion of a government. So let's dig into that statement, like just to clarify what you mean by that. We do not have a government.
We've got a private corporation called Commonwealth of Australia that's registered with the Securities Exchange Commission in New York, and their address is 1601 Massachusetts Avenue, Washington. And here's a prospectus. Would you like, oh, you can't, you're not an A-class shareholder, mate. You can't participate with this.
Yeah.
So we're human resources. Now, all countries exist that way. So everything is a condition of corporation. So it's not what you would call like a de jure or a lawful government elected by the people. So in this country, we've had a number of instances where things have changed. And I could give you the most significant one, which people wouldn't realise, but do you remember the date of when the money changed from pounds, shillings and pence into dollars and cents?
I can't remember the exact date. It was the late 60s, I think it was.
It was the 14th of February, 1966.
Yeah, that's a bit before my time. I'm not that old yet.
Oh, someone told me about it. Yeah, anyway, I can remember they had a little banknote and he used to sing a song.
Yeah, so basically shifting from currencies and from conversions
the point is this.
To decimal currency.
With our constitution, it's defined in the constitution who pays the judges and where that money comes from and what they're paid in. When they changed the currency, there was no referendum to do it.
Right.
There was no act that received the royal assent to change into decimals. But once they did that, the Liberal Party did that, they brought that in. From that point on, we don't have any money. It's all digital. It's make believe, but we do. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say I wasn't around for the decimal currency changeover, but I was aware of the time when Australians' currencies changed on the notes, and I know we've covered off on that in money in relation to money and fiat currency notes previously, but where the notes were changed from saying having written the Commonwealth of Australia to just Australia.
Yeah. And when you look at a note, how do you know it's a dollar? Like if it's got a 5 on it, how do you know it's $5?
Because it has a 5 on it.
Yeah, and a dollar on it. So it's an assumption. Yeah, but the other thing that's on the $5 note, if people have a look, is there's a lovely picture of, well, whether you like her or not, but we'll just stay nice that way. Yeah. There's a picture of a woman that we know as Elizabeth. Well, that's actually who's on that note. It's Elizabeth. It's not Queen Elizabeth. Now, if you can find a crown on that woman's head, you could even find a tiara. So she's there, but it's a deception because without that crown, and people won't like what I say, some people wouldn't like it, but the fact is that she's not on the money as the Queen because it's not the Queen's money. She didn't ascend, she didn't provide royal assent to that at all. So what you've got in this country there, then all your judges are paid by private corporations to do what they're told to do. They're not paid out of consolidated revenue. And our consolidated revenue is in a condition of limbo at the moment. So if the people had changed it, that's one thing. But the money of the United Kingdom is an issue that has to be changed to referendum. And at that level, it even has to go to the other United Kingdom countries. But they're all in a similar position, whether it be England, Canada, or whatever. People need to look at things. Now, to give you an example of what I'm talking about, if you went to the Royal Styles and Titles from 1953, where Elizabeth came in, because, you know, Daddy's not with us anymore, well, he had all his paperwork, she needed to have her paperwork. So that's all put in place. the royal styles and titles and everything, and about how things will progress when she dies, that sort of thing, then she signs off at the bottom. Because, and with going through with David-Wynn, but people will know generally that when you sign a document, Paul, where do you sign it? You sign it at the end.
Mm-hmm.
You sign it after all the information.
Yeah.
Now, when she came to Australia in 1973, the 20-year anniversary, and we had another royal styles and titles, and I might be saying that the wrong way around, but people can look it up. They get exactly what it is. That was in 1973. At the same time, Australia had basically been sold out through Unidroit, where Australia was then operating as a corporation. Well, Elizabeth R, like R for Regina, which is the Queen, she didn't agree with that. Now, people will tell you, but she signed off on it. Well, she might have signed off on it, but where she signed off on it was above the title. So there's actually no text before her signature.
Right.
You could even argue, and she's actually put a line through the bottom where that's it. She's finished. There's nothing below her signature that she's connected with. And that's when they brought in Queen of Australia. Now, the other thing that she is the protector of the faith. Now, the faith isn't just the Church of England. It's for all denominations. It's for the faith of all the people. She's there to make sure that, like, she might be Church of England, but you don't have to be. You can be whatever you want. And the Queen of Australia is not a defender of the faith. So people start looking at things. And if you have a look at the oath that Scott Morrison took when he became or was sworn in as Prime Minister.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
The oath out of the Constitution. No, not even the same. And he even, instead of saying Her Majesty, he said Her Managesty. Now, I haven't found a dictionary that's got that word in it.
You don't think that was like you don't think that was just an error?
Oh, it could have been an error, and it wasn't really a very important thing, so it doesn't matter probably. I'm pretty sure you go mulligan on that and to have a do-over, don't you think? Because it was filmed. There was all people there. They could have easily, like for all we know, that was the third take. Yeah. Because they are actors. And you've noticed now, even particularly on the American news channel, that they do refer to politicians as actors, or he's a bad actor, that sort of thing. And I don't know when that started happening, but I thought they're actually telling people now. Yeah. But people don't hear. So.
Okay, so let's go back to the conversation about privacy and QR codes and COVID tracing apps, and I just want to touch on that as well, and just let people know that pretty much there's a lot of mass surveillance that's happening. That's my background in relation to privacy as a privacy advocate, and people don't even need to have the COVID Safe app or whatever variation and version of that is for people around the world. The automatic updates on the Android and iPhones are pretty much the automatic updates enable the tracing apps, etc.
Well, Paul, when we have a look at privacy, so I work in the building industry. Okay, and everything else I do is outside of that time. And then one day, one of the carpenters was telling the bloke how he got in trouble off his wife because he said, "Oh, where were you yesterday?" And we go, "Oh, I had to go here and I had to do this." And she said, "No, you didn't." And he's like, "What?" He's not a bad bloke, and it was only something sort of innocent, but he'd like stopped into the pub on the way home. Yeah. And she'd been following his timeline on Google, looking up Google Maps, and she knew exactly where he was and when he was, and he didn't know that existed. Yeah. So why do you need an app on your phone to say that you were somewhere when Google has got you all the time? Now, if you turn off timeline from Google Maps, all that means is you're not looking at it, but they are. They still know exactly. And when you turn it back on, you'll find history of where you've been. It's not like you had it off for a week and they didn't record you for a week. So when that's there, what's the significance of having to comply with an instruction that you've got to click in, that you've got to do this, or you can't have your toys? Yeah. We're having a conversation on Thursday night, actually, with David-Wynn, and we're talking about the decentralized and encrypted mobile phones and that sort of thing. So
looking forward to that conversation as well, but not just in relation to Google and the automatic updates. You don't need to have the COVID app and they're tracking people through the GPS, etc. But it's also the fact that, you know, the surveillance is much more in depth than what people realize, even in relation to their own other apps and spyware, etc. that gets. So it just came out in the last week that Spotify is listening in on people's conversations as well. So I don't know whether you saw the news on that.
No, look, this isn't, we're talking about privacy, so generally it's covered, all right?
Yeah.
But my family, we went away for a trip to Queensland. There we were, it was my younger sister's birthday, and we're all staying in the one place. And we're playing charades. I'm Australian, charades. Okay, so acting stuff out. Now, my daughter, my eldest daughter, and I hope she doesn't mind me saying, but she's got a full sleeve of tattoos, and it's all Alice in Wonderland. Everything, the whole Alice is on there, the caterpillar, the whole lot, the Mad Hatter, all of that's all on there. And one of her friends had new glasses, and we were calling him Clark Kent. Now, so we're playing charades, and we're using an app on the phone to play charades, where you get your next clue. And my daughter comes out to do her thing, and she just stands up and points to her arm. And we go, Alice in Wonderland. Yep, put it in one.
Yeah.
When a friend came up and he stood up, he just went, oh yeah, Superman. Yep. Now, what a coincidence. That was really freaky. And even people who don't think of being monitored, sort of that got their attention, because it wasn't just one, it was two. And it was so specific. And now that was 6 years ago, but I remember us having meetings in the very early days, and it was pull the mobile phone apart, take the battery out, it all goes into a bowl, and it's all in another room.
Yeah.
And off we go.
Yeah.
And I think I've
in the oven or the fridge.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
Somewhere away.
Metal cage.
And now you can't take the batteries out. Well, you probably can, but it's not so easy. But I've always been of the opinion, once I started finding out about all sorts of things, that we are actually monitored. It's a matter of whether there's anybody interested in what we're doing. So, but everything's retrospective. So if I wanted to, if I had somebody, say if I was a government, we'll call it, say, a government agent, I could easily access where you've been for the last however long.
Yeah.
And then I can find something in there. So there might not be somebody actively monitoring, but if they decide you're a problem or whatever, they can then look in your history and that sort of thing. And I've always thought, well, they can do that anyway. And there's a different thing. I think that the encrypted phones are an awesome thing for people and help them feel more comfortable. But what I do, because I'm slightly insane, every now and then I talk to the monitors and I call them names and I identify their mental capacity and all sorts of things, and then I move on. We've got some friends that when we're having phone calls, occasionally we do it. There's a couple of people I talk to where more than one time we've heard somebody cough. It wasn't in the conversation, and we've had somebody laugh. It wasn't in the conversation. And they can hear it from their end when they click in and click out. But just this week, I've gotten in my car, started the car up, and looked at the head unit from for Bluetooth and all the rest of it to find out that I'm already in a phone call I didn't know I was on.
Yeah.
And it's to a private number, and it's happened to me twice. And I've never had that happen before. And I'm looking up on my phone and I can't find where I've made a phone call or how that's occurred. So I thought, that's a bit interesting.
Yeah. So can we go back to the conversation we're talking about? Because really it's about, what's happening with people's businesses and basically the assault on the small and medium businesses in the world as the technocracies and the multinational corporations just like start steamrolling everything and everyone. And we're going to be in for a really funky time. And people, can we just talk about what's happening with people's obligations? You talked about the QR codes, and I know you're going to share some screen and just talk about the Privacy Act as well. Yeah.
Let's hope I've got the right one, because I can't quite see it, but we'll share it. There we go.
Right.
So this is Schedule 1 amendments of Privacy Act 1988. Please don't nod off, because it is important. It's important to be aware of. So there's a couple of terms you need to be aware of. Now, I made an error initially when I was talking to people, and I thought that the COVID Safe app was an app that you had to download to your phone and then click onto the QR code. And that's not correct. COVID Safe is the app that you're going to get in the shops you go to. That's what they're sort of connected to. And that's what scanning the QR code is connected to the COVID Safe app. When you're doing, you've got COVID app data, and we'll find this down in section 94D.
Okay, where do people, because some people will be listening to this as well, Stephen, on via the podcast, audio only. So where do people find this?
Well, this is just Consolidated Act. Or even if you put into DuckDuckGo or Bing or whatever.
Brave browser.
Brave browser, yep, whatever is in Google, and put in Privacy Act 1988, you'll get links. And there's I can never say it, Australis. You're just looking for the legislation. So the Consolidated Act, and you'll find that you can find specific things for different states. But every country will have a Privacy Act of some description. Now, this particular one was updated, I think I said in May, June last year.
Okay, 2020.
Yeah, so it's not like it's something that isn't up to date with what's going on. This is well and truly there. And the other thing that people might do just for interest is do a term-specific search through your legislation and just put COVID and press enter. And you're going to find legislation that's got COVID in it that you won't be able to work out why it's there. This is not about a virus. This is not about a virus. This is about you complying and coming under control and staying within borders. And eventually, I think, getting actually classed into different sections. You'll have social credits. You'll have all sorts of different things. Dan Andrews from Victoria said that, you know, the people should have something downloaded to themselves so that when they go into an area they're not allowed to go into, the authorities can be notified.
Yeah.
I thought, oh, that's interesting.
Just in relation to that as well, Stephen, I don't know whether people have seen it in the media in the last day or so, but the Victorian government, Australia, is in the process of putting towards the government to approve the extension until December 2021. Yeah.
This isn't, I've been telling people at work, like before we went on holidays, I said, well, get ready for the second wave, boys. And they go, what? Because they don't call me crazy anymore, but they still look at me the same way.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you a story about that. I will, because it's important. Like I care about people.
Yeah.
I do genuinely care. And a lot of people get really hurt, and that's not right. So I might use a bit of humour somewhere to get through things, or I try and be light, because I've had people tell me I hate to be in your head. But the things that I'm aware of, but that's, you get above it anyway.
Yeah.
So I've been told not to talk to people at work, and sometimes I don't listen to that, or I do, but I just choose to put it aside. And there was a fellow that we had that had cancer, and he had lots of radiation treatment, and he'd been off work basically with pneumonia. And I walked past him and I thought, no, I'm going to say it. And I said, mate, if you have to go to hospital, just please listen to me. Under no circumstances whatsoever, let them put you on a ventilator. And he turned to me and he said, I know.
Yeah.
And I said, what? He said, I know. I said, how do you know? He said, my oncologist rang me.
Right.
And she told me that if I got admitted to hospital with pneumonia, under no circumstances whatsoever, allow them to put me on a ventilator because it would kill me. Now, how fortunate was he to have an oncologist? He's sort of finished with her, like she's still in the, you know, it's an ongoing relationship, but they weren't sort of active at the time. But she sort of cared enough about him to ring him and tell him that. So I've got a bit of credibility with him, but people don't understand what's being done to them. A respirator is not a ventilator. Now, we move down through, so you get all your terms as you normally do, the COVID safe user, you go through, but there's significance in the Privacy Act that people aren't aware of. Registration data of a person means the information about the person that was uploaded from a communication device when the person was registered through COVID safe. So this doesn't, nowhere in here does it say QR code.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it's not about it. Because if you scan the QR code, why are you scanning it? What's happening? Your information's being put into the COVID safe register, and it's being stored. So registration data of a person, and that's another thing legally speaking, because in a conversation with law, I'm not a person, but that's another whole new sort of area. Comes down to the deception in the legislation. So that's one way you know that includes the QR code, state or territory, or that all just means that. Now, simplified. There are several, because we have people who don't have a screen, don't we, Paul?
Correct. We have some people who will be listening to this via podcast.
Okay, so there are several serious offences, a simplified outline of this part. There are several serious offences relating to COVID app data and COVID safe. So that makes a distinction. They deal with non-permitted collection, use or disclosure relating to COVID app data and uploading COVID app data without consent. I'll say that again, uploading COVID app data without consent. Everything is a condition of contract. Even if I tell you this is mandated, you still have to agree, because a company can only mandate things to members of that company. If you're not in the company, it doesn't apply to you. Even then, it still requires consent. But you don't realise that things are running under companies or corporations. Sorry, there is a difference between companies and corporations. So under corporations, you get contracted in. Now retaining, and it's it's the television in particular, is just mind-numbing what they're doing on that. Now, retaining or disclosing uploaded data outside Australia. Now, that's actually going to happen. We've got Five Eyes, and you're more familiar with Five Eyes than I am.
Yeah.
From what I hear you speaking.
Okay.
So with Five Eyes, isn't it correct that all the members, they can't spy on their own population?
Yeah, correct. So I'll just touch on that for people that don't know about the Five Eyes. So the Five Eyes Alliance was really was created at some point to spy on other countries that were not part of that alliance. So the Five Eyes is basically Australia, New Zealand, Canada, US and UK, and those intelligence organisations within GCHQ in the UK, for example. In Australia, we have what's my mind at the moment?
ASIO?
The signals intelligence. So ASIO and the Signals Directorate. So yeah, but it's basically what happened is all those other countries outside of Australia, their governments and their citizens would never allow surveillance of their citizens. And unfortunately, Australia has no Bill of Rights. So what that means is what happened in Australia and it's interesting because I had a conversation via live stream with Chelsea Manning in relation to this when at an event. And what happened was the Five Eyes Alliance met on the Gold Coast in Australia on or about November 2018. And Australia agreed to process the data for all the rest of those Five Eyes countries because of the fact that we have no Bill of Rights. And that's where the loophole is there. And then they basically, whatever they do with that. Michael Hayden, the former head of CIA, said at some point in time that they actually use metadata to track and to kill people. That's what they said. And that all that intelligence and metadata is used for drone strikes in places like the Middle East and that sort of thing, Stephen. So
yeah, but what I loosely understand with that, Paul, is it's one of those ridiculous arrangements where, on another level, they're actually saying, "Well, we won't spy on our own people, but we'll get you to do it. Then you can give us the information."
Yeah, that's it.
It's all just like if we were to do that in our contracts. Anyway.
Yeah.
So that's part of the deception. Now, decrypting encrypted COVID app data.
Yeah.
Requiring participation in relation to COVID safe.
What does that actually mean, though, Stephen? Requiring participation.
Well, we'll get into that.
Right, okay. Sorry, I'm jumping the gun.
No. Yeah, because it's just headings.
Yeah.
It's just headings.
Oh, okay.
There's another heading that should be in there too. It should be talking about coercion. Participate with COVID safe. Because that's naughty. We're not allowed to do that. Not that you and I will, but the other people do. Now, we've got to remember that everything is a corporation, and if you can prove anything different to me, I'm open. You go for it. But we've found the ABNs, and it's not just so because there's GST, and it's not just because of this. That's just so ridiculous. It's beyond belief. You've only got to look at Scott Morrison's oath and look at our constitution, and if you can convince yourself that he's compliant with our constitution, which also doesn't allow for a prime minister, like you're really telling yourself stories, and probably a very strong sign that you've been mentally corrupted, probably by newspapers and television and the radio. And that's my personal opinion.
Yeah.
Not that I'm qualified to give it, whatever. Anyway, other specific obligations relate to deletion of data and what is to happen after the COVID safe data period has ended, as determined by the Health Minister. Now, some of these things that they've got in here are actually sort of fair enough to be what you would expect. And that's the way of hiding the deception as well, by giving you stuff to go, oh yeah, that's good, I'm glad they get rid of that, and all the rest of it. But the other thing is that people can actually participate with other organisations that have QR scanning available and the uploading of COVID safe information. So it's not necessarily just coming from one source. There's a number of questions that you might be inclined to ask. What I've seen people doing is they'll pretend to scan the code, they'll do this. I don't like that myself, because I think it's giving other people the impression that you're complying. And and to whoever's listening, and I don't care what you're wearing or what rank or anything you are, I will not comply. I'm not complying. There's other words that I could put in there with who I'm not complying with in relation to a suppression order. We'll leave that out at the moment. So,
yeah, I've covered that in my speeches previously about people using encryption, and talking about Senator Bill Heffernan raised in Australian Federal Parliament about the suppression of 28 high-ranking pedophiles, and including former judges, politicians, high-ranking officials, including a former Prime Minister of Australia, being under a 90-year suppression order for anyone that has.
Well, that information is available. That information is actually available, Paul, and I think I've got hold of it now, and I want to be going through it. And what I see from all these suppression orders, and whatever, none of them are valid because we don't have a judge in the country at the moment. And I wouldn't be surprised if somebody were to be prepared to sort of put those names out there in the correct context.
Yeah.
But that's another issue. But so basically what I'm saying is there's no way I'm complying with pedophile enablers, pedophile supporters, or pedophiles themselves.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing, the whole legal system, everything. So ensuring that COVID app data is taken to be personal information, and breaches of this part are interferences with privacy. They also cover the fact that they could accidentally pick up other information out of your phone that they didn't intend to. So we're sorry about that, but we won't use it and we won't look at it because it's an offence. But how would you know that they had it? How would you know that they were looking at it? They actually tell you that could happen, but it's not meant to. And we're sorry about that. Enhancing the Commissioner's role in dealing with eligible data breaches, making assessments and conducting investigations in relation to this part, and basically destroying a really good portion of your life by taking 10 years to go through inquiries and do absolutely nothing, except take all your money and your time and have you under the misconception that they're going to do something about it. Enabling the Commissioner to refer matters to and share information or documents with state or territory privacy authorities. And part of this, of course, is to make sure that we don't have the people that had a motorbike, or let's say you're in your car, you got your mobile phone with you, some guy's on a push bike and he rides past you and he's got his mobile phone, he's tested positive or been near somebody who did, he drove past you, and now all of a sudden you've got to be isolated because you were within 1.5 metres of him, even though you're in your car with your window up. I don't think it's going to record that bit. Anyway, providing for this act to apply to state or territory health authorities in relation to COVID app data. So it's just, this part imposes on state or territory health authorities the Act's rules and privacy protections and Commonwealth oversight in relation to COVID app data as Commonwealth property that those authorities receive. Now remember, the Commonwealth property should be the people, but in the case of Australia, Commonwealth of Australia is a private company. And you ain't in it. And that's all there is to it. You're just subjected to it. This part also cancels the effect of Australian laws. So, pay attention. This part also cancels the effect of Australian laws that are inconsistent with the prohibitions in this part. So another way to say that would be that they're repugnant. So this dominates. If there's another law that conflicts with this, this one takes over. And there's a reason why that's important. Now, 94B, the object of this part is to assist in preventing and controlling the entry, emergence, establishment, spread of something that you can't catch because it's a virus and not transmittable. I didn't say that. That must have just fallen out of my head. Known as COVID-19 into Australia or in any part of Australia by providing stronger privacy protections for COVID app data and COVID safe users in order to encourage public acceptance and uptake of COVID safe and enable faster and more effective contact tracing. But here we're talking about something that's encouraging acceptance. Does that sound like a law?
No, it sounds like a psychological manipulation.
You've got a wicked mind, Paul. You're probably correct. So, principal constitutional basis, blah, blah, but we don't really have to go through those things so much.
Yeah.
A person commits an offence if the person, so this is section 94D for those who don't have it in front. So division 2, offences relating to COVID app data and COVID safe. 94D, collection, use or disclosure of COVID app data. 1, a person commits an offence if A, the person collects, uses or discloses data, and B, the data is COVID app data, and the collection, use or disclosure is not permitted under this section. Penalty, imprisonment for 5 years or 300 penalty units, or both. Do you know how much a penalty unit is, Paul?
I'm guessing to say $1, but that's probably doesn't sound...
You didn't allow for inflation, mate.
Oh, okay. 1988.
I think it's 220.
Okay.
What's that, about 66,000 or something?
Mm-hmm. That sounds about over 50K.
I think it's got lots of sixes in it.
Yeah.
By coincidence, I think. So the collection, use or disclosure is permitted if the person is employed by or in the service of a state or territory health authority. Okay, so that's not the local restaurant. And the collection, use or disclosure is for the purpose of and only to the extent required for the purpose of undertaking contact tracing. Or the person is an officer or employee of the data store administrator, still not the local restaurant, a contracted service provider for a government contract with the data store administrator, still not in the restaurant, and the collection, use or disclosure is for the purpose of and only to the extent required for the purpose of enabling contact tracing by persons employed by or in the service of state or territory health authorities, or ensuring the proper functioning, integrity or security of COVID safe or of the national COVID safe data store. We still haven't got to the restaurant. Or in the case of a collection or disclosure of COVID app data, the collection or disclosure is for the purpose of and only to the extent required for the purpose of. You reckon you learnt this at school when you did English?
No, not at all.
Not at all. Transferring encrypted data between communication devices through COVID safe, or transferring encrypted data through COVID safe from a communication device, might be your phone, the national COVID safe data store, or the collection, use or disclosure is for the purpose of and only to the extent required for the purpose of the Commissioner performing the functions or exercising the powers of the Commissioner under or in relation to this part, or the collection or use or disclosure is for the purpose of and only to the extent required for the purpose of investigating whether this part has been contravened or prosecuting a person for an offence against this part. Can you see why I do this on weekends?
Yeah, it's riveting.
Yeah.
You might just have to dumb that down for a little bit for me, Steve. I'm just like, trying to get my eyes are starting to glaze over already.
Yeah, no, look, all I'm telling you is that it's telling you all the people that can do it.
Right.
And that's why I said none of them's a restaurant yet.
Okay.
So, subsection 1 does not apply to the collection of COVID app data if the collection of the COVID app data occurs as part of the collection at the same time of data that is not COVID app data. Now, why do you have to mention it? Because it can happen. That's why you have to mention it, okay?
Right.
That's the point I was trying to make, get to before. So, the admissibility of the non-COVID app data as evidence in any proceedings is not affected by the incidental collection of the COVID app data or by the subsequent deletion of the COVID app data as required by subparagraph 3. You might have to dance with that for a little while to realise what they're saying. It's almost sounding like they can use any other information that they accidentally got because they weren't trying to get it. You know, that stuff you might need a warrant for.
Yeah.
COVID app data, this is the important part, is data relating to a person that has been collected or generated, including before the commencement of this part, through the operation of COVID Safe. That's your QR code. That's where it brings you in. Either is registration data or is stored or has been stored, including the commencement on a communication device. So let me see if I try and move forward to contact tracing. So yes, we'll go through now. It's pretty much a repeat of before, going through to 94F. That's more talking about the people that are connected with collecting the information for the legitimate government, that are collecting it. That's arguable. Or if they disclose data outside Australia or whatever. So that's to make you feel good. 94H, requiring the use of COVID Safe. A person commits an offence if the person requires another person to download COVID Safe to a communication device, or have COVID Safe in operation on a communication device, or consent to uploading COVID app data from a communication device to the National COVID Safe Data Store. A person commits an offence if the person requires another person to do it. So when the restaurant thinks they have to use COVID Safe and you have to use the QR code, whoever told them to do that is committing an offence. Now, in most cases, I've found when I ask people what the source is, they were told, or didn't you hear it on the radio when the minister for whoever is said that we have to do it? You know, does anybody ever heard about if you go to court and you rely on the fact that somebody told you something, that doesn't count?
Yeah.
You either need to have that person there to verify that they told you, or you need to have it in writing.
Yeah.
Now, the penalty for that is 5 years or 300 penalty units or both. A person commits an offence if the person refuses to enter into or continue a contract or arrangement with another person, including a contract of employment, or takes adverse action within the meaning of the Fair Work Act 2009 against another person, or refuses to allow another person to enter premises that are otherwise accessible to the public, or premises that the other person has a right to enter, or refuses to allow another person to participate in an activity, or refuses to receive goods or services from another person, or insists on providing less monetary consideration for the goods or services, or refuses to provide goods or services to another person, or insists on receiving more monetary consideration for the goods or services. So take on that.
Yeah.
Nobody can make you participate with COVID Safe and then refuse your service because you didn't. Anything that you could do before COVID was a thing still is there for you to do. It can't stop you. And anybody who's trying to make you do that, they are breaching this act. Now, the thing that businesses need to be made aware of, if they don't have it in writing, there's no compulsion to do it. Directives are not law. A guideline is not law. Suggesting isn't law. The person that does it, they're in breach of this because they work for a corporation and they're putting a restriction or imposing an obligation on you through coercion and through threats. You could get fined if you don't do this. So as soon as they say anything to people, that's the first thing they say. We can get fined. We can get fined $5,000. They came in and told us we can get $1,000 for everyone that's here and whatever. Get it in writing. If you've got a business and someone's telling you you have the duty to perform for them, where's the contract? Where is it in writing? And I want your wet ink signature on that. Why? Because if you can't do this, or I'm damaged because of your action and you didn't have a lawful reason, and none of them do, I'm going to sue you, right? And I'm going to take your house off you. That's what I'm going to do. Now, that's not necessarily easy, but this is part of the conversation. But the purpose for this here is to try and get business owners to realise what's going on. They don't have to do this. They're actually destroying their own businesses. So
can we just get some context for people who are listening as well? Because I don't want to get too sort of heady in relation to the data. So
I don't want to play with it at all.
yeah, it's very interesting. So let's simplify a little bit. So in relation to the situation that I experienced, like being refused access to an establishment for not scanning in with the QR code, like what's another alternate course of action in relation to that?
I would suggest that you have this section like printed out, that you get them to look at it.
Yeah.
Now, we've got people that have different methods of communicating with people that they think have breached their rights, shall we say. And that's by providing people with a notice. So the one thing that I'm suggesting is we're not trying to have a business that's already suffering have to pay a fine or look at imprisonment or anything like that. We want them to wake up and look. We've got to get through to the people that are basically under mind control because they believe in what the television is telling them. When you've got legislation like this and you can put it in front of somebody and they can read it, it should confuse the hell out of them. It should not make any sense at all.
Yeah.
And hopefully through that confusion, there can be a discussion where you can enlighten them or bring some awareness to where they would look at things.
So just in relation to that, we've got some questions coming through in the group chat as well, Stephen. Some people are saying that the question is who gives Marianne said, who gives the COVID package, the signs, info, etc., all the retail outlets, cafes, restaurants, public places. Where does it all come from? Under which department?
That's a really good question because nobody has been able to give me anything in writing. I get visited by people. The local council came in and said. So everything seems to be verbal, and it's coming. A lot of it's coming through the television and the radio. From what I can see, and this is only my experience, right? I'm just one man, and I don't walk in all places, right?
Sure.
And not everybody wants to talk to me or whatever. I haven't found anybody that's got anything in writing that says that they have to do this or else.
Yeah, so there's no instruction. It's just the coercion and the directives and the perception of the threat.
Yes.
Yeah, so they haven't been served any legal documents stating the guidelines and the criteria and the laws and etc.
Yeah, and it's important to say not to my knowledge. But if people do have it, I would love to be able to get copies of it because in Australia in particular, there is no lawful authority anywhere. But for multiple reasons, there's just no lawful authority. These are private corporations. And if people, in our constitution, the copy that most people get has got 9 paragraphs removed from the front of it. And in those paragraphs, it says, whereas the people, the people. Now, in all this legislation, oh, look, here's people. Oh, no, it's not, it's person. Now, legally, people and persons are not equivalent. The plural of person is not people. The plural of person is persons. People are not in the acts and statutes that are being applied. So it's a legal trick. And there's lots of people who would already be aware of it.
Let's expand on that really quick as well. So the difference between, like as far as legalese is concerned, the difference between people or a person, like what's the definition under LAW for person or persons?
Well, the person effectively is a dead entity. It's a nom de guerre. It's like a war name. And that's usually, you'll find that on your license, that your name will not be spelt correctly. Everybody, of the majority, sorry. So, and there's also titles applied and that sort of thing. And when I say spelt correctly, it's through the use of capital letters.
Yeah.
If you go into a cemetery, you're going to find the gravestones, the headstones are written in capital letters. And the only times that I've seen that they're not is when it's like a pauper's grave and it's on a cross.
Yeah.
It just doesn't want it sticks.
This sort of relates into the conversation about the creation of the straw man or the legal entity that's created, which is your name in all caps.
Yeah, now there's information that I've been studying with people from New Zealand and different places, and it's pretty hard in 5 minutes to bring that through. But your base, from the evidence that we've been able to find, I don't know if I really want to go there. Okay, it will come this way.
Righto.
For I'm just trying to think of the first word, but birth, there's a legal maxim that's called inclusio exclusio. And unless something is specifically included, it is excluded.
Mm-hmm.
And the example I give to people, just to be stupid to get their attention, is this is a law for all horses, including camels. What does it apply to? That's a question for you, Paul.
Well, what I'm hearing is horses, including camels.
No, the horses aren't included.
Right.
Because I said this is a law for all horses, including camels. And unless something is specifically included, it's excluded.
Right.
So it has to be included. Now, and that's ridiculous. Like, when you start looking at how they write stuff and what they do, there's no way this is to look after people or it's only a deception.
Yeah,
so the definition of a birth, just to finish why I'm saying that, includes stillbirth. And that's the only definition for a birth.
Right.
So a birth that's recorded is only ever a stillbirth. And from what we've found, that's a recording of the placenta, which is treated as your dead twin. And that's what the name belongs to. And then you're using an assumed identity. Now, that's something that I ask you to keep your mind open because it's a lot to take in and it wasn't meant to be part of here, but it's just so convoluted.
Yeah.
When you get back to it.
And that sort of ties into, we won't go into too much detail because there's a lot of ground to cover, but in relation to what we have talked about previously about being based on admiralty or maritime law and birthing certificates or passports, port passes. And I do remember vividly the conversation there, like how did this evolve to the point of getting beyond the maritime law and the sea? And I do remember David-Wynn saying at some point in time is that considering the Earth as a vessel in the sea of space. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, which words can I use to describe it? Not that one, not that one, not that one. It's not a good situation. It's not an honest situation. It's all meant for deceiving and deception and hiding things.
Trickery.
And that's what common law is definitely not about.
Yeah.
So why do you have to have separate legal dictionaries, law dictionaries? A word that have words in them that you got taught at school that means something different to what you were taught.
Well, I would say, Stephen, it's because that they're playing one game and we've been told the rules to another game and we think we're playing that game, but they've actually got a rule book for a different game that they're playing.
Yeah. We go in to play chess and they're playing karate.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous. It's really just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Now, we'll just move, let me say, I think we've got the Work Act, the Fair Work Act 2009, which that mentions back here. And we've got a term that's called an adverse action. For example, if somebody's asking me for some information, I would say to them, is this an information privacy request under the Privacy Act 1988? Now, the reason why I'm saying those words is because those words are included in the Act.
Right.
So I'm invoking.
Could you just repeat that again, please, Stephen?
Is this an information privacy request under the Privacy Act 1988?
Okay.
You basically are you asking me? You need to provide me evidence that you got the right to do this. Okay, to ask me, and that's when you actually ask them to put it in writing and to sign their request.
So you're talking about a policy? You're referring to a police officer or a policy officer or like
anybody that you don't want to answer a question to?
Yeah.
Who's got a right to know your private stuff?
Mm-hmm.
You can decide that.
Yeah.
But don't do it from fear, or don't do it because they're not going to sell you an ice cream cone. So that's when you start looking at other actions from what we can do. But I'm not sitting here telling you that because this legislation is here and these things are offences that you go, oh, great, I've got a solution. I'll just go in and do that and the courts will fine them. Because that isn't necessarily going to happen.
Yeah.
They are not honest. They are far, far, far from honest. My personal experience and the people that I have associations with and what goes on, it's just far, far from honest.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Sorry, keep going, mate. We're just going to cover a bit of ground on this.
Yep. Where was I up to?
Well, let's just people could find this document and go into it themselves. I really want to just touch on the the remedy, and
Sorry.
also if there's any other documents that you want
I've got it, an adverse action.
Okay.
Okay. The second part of it is, will this information privacy request, or can this information privacy request result in an adverse action? Because under the Fair Work Act 2009, when somebody is at work, they are not allowed to cause an adverse action on you.
Yeah.
Through their work. And what's an adverse action? Paul, you're making me feel uncomfortable. That's an adverse action.
Yeah.
In this world we have of snowflakes now, we go outside and melt. You made me feel bad about myself. That's an adverse action.
Yeah.
So you can start to bring this paperwork in, bring it into question, and then we can formulate notices to somebody about this. And you need to have people's names and addresses, that sort of thing. That's the other thing. If you're going into a place of work, throw this logic on for size, see if it works for you. And they want your contact details, which ultimately, if there's somebody who tests positive to COVID-19, they want to be able to contact you so that you can self-isolate or whatever. So part of my conversation with that is to say, oh, okay, sounds fair. What's your name? What's your address? I'll also need the names and addresses of all the people here, because I've been a lot of places in the last week. I may have come into contact with somebody, and if I have and I'm notified, I need to let you know so you can shut your business down. And I need to let them know. So I'll need all their information as well. Does one person or one being have more right to information than you do?
No. Well, I'd like to think not.
Well, they don't. Now, there's certain areas where if it's genuine for health and things like that, it can come into it, but none of this is genuine. None of this is real. Like now they're talking about variants for something that they can't identify the first part of. How the hell can you identify a variant of something that you can't identify in the first place? That you can't isolate as an individual protein.
Yeah.
It's just, anyway, that's outside of that. And I'll just stop that one from there. Now, there's a couple of other documents that I've got. Oh, sorry, I will keep that because I can. Whoops, wrong one. I can't read the screen, it gets too small. Excuse me, I'll go back to that one. And let's click on here. This is from the Fair Work Commission, when I mentioned the Fair Work Commission.
Okay, and what's the date of that? Is the 7th of January 2021.
Yeah. So it's a bit out of date. Not too far. This is all current stuff. Now, things can be changed, but this is under the Fair Work Commission banner. So if you're a person going to work and your boss is saying, you got to do this, you got to do that, this is what you bring up. This is what you can bring forward. And if somebody's going to penalise you, cost you your job, because you won't do it, there's enough grey area in here. Because it still all comes down to a request for your private information. The people that are asking for it, at best, are corporations, private corporations. They're not a lawful government at all. And we've got other documentation to go through that. I've got something up here where you might be able to see, it's called David Walter petition.
Yes.
And I've been talking to him. I've been listening to him.
Sorry, who is David Walter, Steve?
He's a 71-year-old retired policeman. And there's been an injunction taken out on him by the courts. He is not allowed to step inside any court in Australia. Right. Because they do not like what he says. Because he asks them questions that they do not want to answer. Yeah. It demonstrates that they don't have a lawful oath. But that's why you can't go into a court of law and say, if I do A, B, C, and D, I get this result. That is not guaranteed. And I don't say nobody ever wins, because it's a bit like the poker machines. Yeah. Somebody always knows somebody who's related to somebody who heard of someone who won. So anyway, so this is pretty much as a repeat of what we were talking about, but it is contained within the Fair Work Act. So it's relevant. Okay. And what do people need to know about this document, this act, Steve? Well, the main thing about it is that if you're being put under pressure by an employer, you have to perform in relation to COVID safe and all of that, that you don't have to. They can't compel you to do it. So an employer must not take adverse action. And remember what I said? You make me feel bad. You make, oh, I'm getting anxious. I'm feeling anxiety against an employee or prospective employee on the grounds that they have not downloaded COVID safe to a communication device, or do not have COVID safe in operation on a communication device, or have not consented to uploading COVID app data. That's the point. That's there. Now, I've had people argue with me that it doesn't say QR code.
Yeah.
Well, somebody explain to me what this means. If it's not. See, you've got the QR code, but when you didn't have a phone, Paul, and you wanted to go into a place, you didn't have a phone, what did they then say to you?
Oh, show us your ID.
Or write,
or write it in. I mean, I don't think even presenting an ID to enter a venue is even lawful either.
No.
But they would ask you to manually write down your name. And
we could argue that a licensed premises, like a club and things like that, that could be the case, and particularly where there's poker machines and for whatever reasons. But that's the point here. I've not consented to uploading COVID app data from a communication device to the National COVID Safety Data Store. The same is true of if you don't have that app and you write it down. Like, otherwise, people are almost saying you're committing an offence if you don't own a mobile phone. I'd like to read that act.
Yeah.
An employer must not dismiss an employee or refuse to employ a person because they haven't downloaded COVID safe. Now, that's specifically saying downloaded COVID safe. So that's not the app data. That's not by signing on. But there's other areas in that come under the Privacy Act, which is an information privacy request. Now, again, what we're trying to do through all of this is have people question and become aware, so they become aware of the deception that we're in. If you think that you can just run into a courthouse and solve all your problems because there's legislation, that's not necessarily going to happen. But if you're aware of people that are connected with common law groups or with other groups that work on paperwork and work on providing notifications to places, or notices as some people call them, we don't like to refer to them as notices because it's a bit like this. I noticed you, Paul. And that's the end of it. But a notification, it's got that ION on the end, that's a contract. That's a different, that's a more specific term. For this is a notification. You need to take notice. You need to take notice of this, not just I noticed you. Thanks for your notice. That was nice. I noticed your notice, and I've sent you a notice. Did you notice the notice that I noticed your notice on? Don't you love words?
Yeah.
Anyway, excuse me.
The power of words and the casting of spells through the deception and deliberate modification of language.
Yes. Oh, good. We're having a crash.
That's okay. That's okay, because I think we've covered a bit of ground there anyway, Steve, and there's a lot of those different aspects of those rabbit holes that we can go down. And I think, there's a lot of people in the world and a lot of people in Australia that just sort of want to do the right thing, and they're just sort of complying, and they don't want to rock the boat, and they want to, they don't want to be difficult. And I think that, the intention from what you're saying is really just to have people, and from what I do with my work, I've been doing for the last 8 years, specifically in relation to talking about privacy and mass surveillance, prior to the metadata laws being rolled out in Australia. Sometimes we're talking into the abyss. So it feels like we're talking into the abyss sometimes, unless it's really starting to, as it will, and we haven't really seen the economic impacts yet. We will in the next quarter, I would say, moving forward. But just having people be informed and educated. So can you share a little bit about like how people can find you as far as your common law group's concerned, and also, what people can start doing to educate themselves in relation to finding remedy and getting themselves educated? Like for a lot of us, I spend a lot of time and I don't sort of have the capacity. That's why I fortunately have enough, fortunate to know people like Stephen here as well in relation to that. But so what can people do moving forward, and how can they find you, etc.?
I'm actually, apart from doing the immense amount of work that you do, I'm a bit like you too, Paul, and somebody described to me once, because I said, I can't work out how come I know all these amazing people that can do amazing things and remember stuff that I can't even remember what it was to look it up. And it was explained that I was the glue. And I said, what? She said, you're holding them all together. Yeah. And then it sort of goes through you. So that's more what I am as well. It's like a conduit. But with the common law group, that's about convening common law courts by the people. But that's not an initial thing, because there's misconceptions with that and there's mispromotion of that. You can only, going back to things that David would say, you can only have what you can hold. That means that you need to have enough force to resist an attack. Like if you're here defending your house and there's you and you've got a stick and you've got 20 blokes pull up with semi-automatic weapons or whatever, the stick ain't going to cut it. You're right. So you need to be able to match that force with that force. And what I mean by that is there needs to be enough people in support of the common law courts. What we look at doing is that we can operate as a tribunal if we need to, and we haven't done that as yet. But that's where somebody has a procedure where they've entered into certain notifications, providing notices, and they haven't got a response, like an unanswered affidavit stands as the truth, and we can see that they've gone through all the correct procedures. We can add the weight, of people who have awareness of legal situations, and we can endorse the fact that they've carried out a correct procedure, and we can give it more weight. But the real power to be in the people, there needs to be enough people. So in the meantime, what we're doing, we're discussing the concepts of things, but then we're looking at solutions for people using whatever we can use. And I'll tell you from where I stand, the legislation is all garbage, ridiculous, not real. The Constitution is ridiculous, garbage, not real. And I don't want to say that in relation to the Bible, but you've got to have a look at who that Bible to be generated. So if we look at the King James Version of 1611, and you can say when there's books left out and things, so that's manipulated information. But if we stand here and I stand with you, we know what's right and we know what's wrong. We don't have to go back into a modified history and the bits that we don't know have been modified, say, well, this piece of paper gives me this right. No, it doesn't. You're born with it. No piece of paper gives it. And if somebody else has to acknowledge it for you to have a right, well, who are they? Who made them king? That's another story. So we could go into that. So we try and get people to be more aware of who they are. And when somebody asks you a question, what compulsion is there on you to answer it? Who are they? You need to ask them who they are. And on proof of your claim, I'm obligated to give you my name. I'll give you my name. Now, I did that with a plainclothes police officer who was carrying a gun when he, with 6 police officers and 2 councillors, 2 council workers, raided a building I was working on out in Matong, which is Japanese for toilet, which is interesting because, anyway. And I was filming him. To give you an idea of what we're talking about with privacy and that sort of thing. I was filming him because I couldn't stop them coming in. We had no trespassing signs, but I was one man with a carpenter up a ladder who wouldn't come down, and I couldn't cover the doors. He said, "Are you recording my voice?" And I can be sarcastic at times. I might not pick up on that. But I've got the camera and I went, well, it is a video camera. And he said, right, you don't have my permission to record my voice. And I said, I don't need your permission. He said, are you familiar with the Listening Act? I said, yes, I am. He says, right, under the Listening Act, you do not have permission to record my voice. And I said, under the Listening Act, it says you need the permission of one of the parties. And he said, that's right. And you do not have my permission. And I said, no, but I've got mine. And he went, what's your name? Now, I'm not driving a car or doing anything like that. And I said, am I obligated to give you my name? He said, yes. I thought, oh, he's allowed to lie to do his job. I don't have that benefit. So I said to him, on proof of your claim that I'm obligated to give you my name, I will give you my name. Now, it might just sound like someone being a smart aleck. What it is, I'm not being belligerent and saying, no, go away, I'm not giving you my name. I'm saying, you provide me the proof that I have to, and I will. And that's fair enough along the way. Now, I filmed him for 20 minutes. So, and at the end of it, when he left after the builder finally came back and he shook hands with him, I went to shake hands with him and he just looked at me and he just looked at me. He didn't like me at all. And I said to him, we all have a role to play. And he said, I knew you were up to something, and he shook my hand. But he doesn't know what I meant. But that's all right. But that's what people have got to remember. Nobody has a superior right to exist than you do. So that applies to you and the people around you. You don't have a superior right to exist than they do. God is within, or the creator is within. These people imposing these situations on us, trying to take control of our life force.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter whether you believe in God or Jesus or the Bible or whatever, there is a creator. And we've all got a common source. We've all got energy. And that energy comes from a common source.
Yeah.
There's others who are out there to exploit it and use it to their advantage.
Yeah.
So a bit of knowledge, and just remember that nobody has a superior right. And if you're asking the questions, you're asking as king. And it doesn't work for as queen, but it's the same deal. It's the same deal. It means that you're in charge. When you're asking questions, you're in charge, and you're also not going to get into trouble as easily asking questions as you will making statements.
Yeah.
It's very easy to be wrong.
Yeah.
With the information I've given you tonight, you've got to take that on board and have a look at it. I'm not telling you that's your get out of jail card, but that's your opportunity for a discussion. And it's an opportunity, if you want to pursue it, if somebody's going to cause you a damage by losing your job, or you can't participate with this, or the kids can't go there, you can actually put something in writing and send it to them. And you can say, I believe you are in contravention of this, or whatever. But don't think that you're going to get the help with a lawyer. You've got a really big chance to go have a huge hunk of your life taken up by trying to do that, with the end result being you spend a lot of money to get nowhere. But that's my personal opinion.
Yeah, it's great, Stephen. It's fascinating, and there's a lot of time we could spend on a lot of these other subjects as well. How do people find your common law group?
That was the question, wasn't it?
Yeah.
AUSCLC.org. We have links there to Zoom meetings. We have Zoom meetings 7:30 on a Wednesday night and on a Thursday night. On a Thursday night, we try to focus more on solutions and help people with paperwork, that sort of thing. But it's also hard to get people. People have got to take responsibility for their own life.
Yeah.
I can't make you free. Paul can't make you free. You have to. And it does take some responsibility, but you can look after your family members. On Wednesday night, we try and have interviews with people who are actually doing things. We've got a different plan, but most of it is in the area of trying to provide solutions to everyday problems that people are running into, particularly sometimes it's with fines in relation to motor vehicles, but these days it's mostly in connection to this garbage that's around us.
Yeah. So it's been fascinating. Thanks for your time, Stephen. I know you've got a lot on your plate at the moment, and I acknowledge you for your contribution and that your love for humanity and for people. So thank you for your contribution. It's a pleasure to have you and call you a friend, and thank you for what you do. And we appreciate everyone listening to this, and we try and getting as much information out as possible so people can get up to speed and get enough information. And it's like, I think that's the theme from what you've shared there so far, is that you've got to ask more questions than providing statements. On
our Zoom meetings, people can ask questions, and I never stop anybody from asking, and I never block anybody from entering.
Yeah.
Okay, so that you can ask, like, within reason, of course. You can ask any question. You can do that. If I can't answer it, there may be someone there who can. But the object is we want to grow together. We don't have an agenda. We're not selling stuff. Nothing at all like that. Along the way, we're just looking for the solution and prepared to be wrong. I can think tomorrow totally differently to what I did today, because I took in new information. Yeah. And it gave me a different perspective. I think you're the sum total of your life's experiences and conversations. And if that means you're going to be the same tomorrow, well, something stopped. Yeah. Beautiful. Stop living. So thank you, Paul. And I'd like to acknowledge it's a mutual admiration society, mate. But you take on a lot, and I know that your heart's really in it. For helping people. So thank you so much for the opportunity. AUSCLC.org. But it's not just about common law, but we believe that the real power, the absolute unstoppable, uncontrollable power, is with the people. If the people don't do it, it doesn't happen. Yeah. We get what we got. That's it. Stephen Lymbery, thanks for joining us. Thank you, Paul. Thank you. Good night. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Much love.